Welcome back to the ADHD biography. I'm John Clarkson, your host, and today I'm speaking to Patrycja Boryka from BBC, and we're talking about her experiences of ADHD in media, social media, and other things as well. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to help bring more conversations about ADHD your way. Patrycja, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Thanks for joining us. So first of all, we usually start off talking a little bit about your first experiences of ADHD, when you first realised you had it, or about your diagnosis.
So it was always a running joke in my family that I have ADHD, but it wasn't like a serious thing because I'd be kind of skipping and, not walking like a serious adult person ever. So I'd always just be skipping down the street, and it was just a joke that I have ADHD. And then I started working at the BBC freelance, and that was fine because I was living with other people. And then I moved to Northampton and started living alone. And that's when I remember saying to a friend, I don't feel like I'm performing anymore. And I didn't quite know what I meant by that. And now I know I was masking, and then nobody was living in the same house as me. So I didn't know what to do on my own. And so I lived on my own, and I started quite struggling with food. So I really just would forget to eat, and I would work out a lot. And then I started worrying, like, oh my God, do I have an eating disorder or something? Because I started trying to track food to eat the right amount, and then I'd become obsessed with it. But then if I didn't track, I'd get stressed.
Yeah.
And it was kind of that on top of doing a job full time that started getting quite overwhelming, if you know what I mean. But then I got asked to cover a shift that wasn't like, I knew how to do it, but it wasn't my interest field, and it wasn't quite my strong skill or my interest, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was producing a show for the next day, whereas I usually tend to produce pieces, storytelling, individual radio packages and stuff like that. And yeah, so I got asked to cover that shift, and I really didn't enjoy it at all. And every time I covered that shift, it got worse and worse and worse rather than getting easier. Because, the longer you do something, in theory, you should just kind of get the hang of it and do it. And it was really frustrating for me because I have 2 degrees in journalism, one in broadcast journalism, one in documentary journalism. So I really should know how to, produce a show. But I think the fact that it wasn't my specific kind of area of interest, I really struggled with it because it was just a lot, and it was working with other people a lot more as well than in my usual role.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just so overwhelming to the point where I went home and I just dreaded doing that shift again. And eventually I said to my boss, I said that I just find it so overwhelming. And I don't remember how I came to the realization about ADHD, but I remember telling my boss in our talk about this shift, saying, I think I have ADHD. Like almost as if I kind of realized it in that chat.
Mid-conversation.
Yeah. And then after that, I kind of went and researched it, and I was just like, oh my God, there is so many other people that feel like me. Because I always felt like everybody was like, I was different from everybody.
Yeah.
Or I had a completely different way of looking at things or thinking about things or doing things. But I always put it down to the fact that I grew up in Poland and then I moved here when I was 10. So I just thought it was a cultural...
Like a cultural difference rather than...
Yeah, I thought it was a cultural difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I always put it down to that, because when I was around Polish people, I didn't quite fit in anyway because I grew up here.
Mm-hmm.
And then with just normal English people, I was always slightly different, or I had a different way of looking at the world and things and what I was doing. So I always put it down to being just from a different country. And yeah, and then it was just working in an office and doing a role that I didn't feel the most confident in, made me kind of realize there's something else going on.
Yeah.
And then, because I kept seeing stuff on social media about it, and it was little jokes like holding your wee until the last minute. And I was like, I do that.
Relate to that, yeah.
I was like, and I used to always complain to everyone and say, my pet peeve is going for a wee. And everyone's like, what is wrong with you? And I just used to find it the most annoying thing in the world. And when I saw these things on TikTok and Instagram Reels, I just was like, oh my God. And the more like documentaries and research I've done, I was like, wow, I'm not the only one that thinks in those ways. And it's not, partly probably is because I'm, you know, I didn't grow up here, but I think a lot of it is being neurodivergent. So that's how I realized it. And I was going through CBT at the time. And it was absolutely not working at all, because they were just asking me to write down your bad thoughts throughout the day and then think about them before bed every day to rationalize them. And I remember saying to the lady, I was like, there's no way I'm going to sit down before going to bed and thinking about my anxious thoughts, because that's another task. And I was like, for me, going to bed is a task. So like, I can't now add an extra task. It's just too many tasks in the day. And yeah, that's how I figured out I had it. And after that, I was kind of, when I told them, I got kind of dismissed from the CBT. I'm so sorry. From the CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
So I got dismissed from that. And then I just, I got referred by them they told my GP about this, because they asked me to write a whole list of why I think I have ADHD. And oh my God, that list was the most ADHD list ever, because the bullet points repeated themselves, and I obviously never read it through again.
And I imagine there was not in chronological order either.
No, it was also, but it was obviously stuff that was just clear ADHD.
Yeah.
The minute the lady read it, she was like, yeah, okay, let's just, and then I got referred for a diagnosis. So that was it.
Nice. And obviously that led you to creating the ADHD story as well. So I imagine that was a much easier project to work on than the shift you was covering, being able to add that element of creativity to it.
Yeah, so after realizing I had it, and the way I came up with the idea was because I was trying to research ADHD and I couldn't find anything straight to the point, because I think there is a lot of podcasts where they provide a community for people with ADHD, you know, joking about how ADHD manifests and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They're communities. But there wasn't like an educational resource that would say, this is ADHD, this is how it looks, and let's translate this into real life examples, especially for women as well. And so I couldn't find anything. And I work in I do radio, audio production stuff. And I got really excited. I was like, well, I want to tell my story, and I want to do it in my way, and a creative way that I know that would work for my brain to understand. So I asked my boss, and it took a long time for me to explain how I wanted to tell the story.
Yeah.
Because it was different from like a normal person-to-person podcast format. It was more of a creative
like project where there's loads of different angles you can probably work from. So I imagine was refining that quite difficult, because obviously
and also because it was my idea in my head and I knew how I wanted it to sound, it was hard to translate it to somebody else. But yeah, so once I was allowed to do that, I was in my element, because I was absolutely obsessed with learning about ADHD, but also I really was passionate about explaining it to other people, because I feel like quite often, people don't understand what it actually is, because I didn't, which is why I didn't know I had it. But also I think then when I'd go and say, oh, I have ADHD, someone would always say, like, I've had comments said to me like, oh, well, who diagnosed you? It was before I had my diagnosis, but when I realized, and I'm like, well, nobody, but now I understand what it is, and it's clear I've had it my whole life. So I really wanted to, explain it to people who just have no idea what it actually is. And two, just bring it to life, because I know from my experience reading like the NHS page on ADHD, and it says, you know, hyperactive and the basic symptoms, you don't actually know how that shows up in real life, because then you find out that hyperactivity isn't only physical, so you're not running around doing cartwheels all the time, which I have done when I was younger, probably.
Yeah, but then as you grow older, it obviously manifests in different ways, doesn't it? So,
and I didn't know it could manifest as like mental hyperactivity. And I thought everybody had like 15 strands of thought at once.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Like, not everybody does this. So when I learned this stuff, I wanted to really bring it to life and give examples in life how it shows up. So I made 4 episodes, and the first one was what actually is ADHD, to explain the symptoms, the basics, and the science, but in a human language. Then the second one was how a diagnosis works. So covering all types of, private, NHS, direct to choose, and why people might want a diagnosis. And some people don't. Some people are, just
Quite
enough with just
happy
knowing. And
absolutely.
then the third one was stigma, and that one was really important for me because I felt like a lot of people think that it's an excuse, or, you're making things up just to excuse poor organization and planning. But what they don't understand is, this comes from part of your brain, and it actually genuinely impacts your everyday life.
Yeah.
So I wanted to illustrate the stigma around ADHD. So I actually went out on the street and asked people, and I had comments.
Yeah, the biggest thing that struck me, because having listened to it, the especially the stigma episode, that was for me like the one that stuck the most, because the amount of people that that weren't aware that of ADHD and what it actually was, but also like the amount of people that was dismissive, as if it wasn't even a thing, that it didn't exist.
Yeah.
How did you, obviously having ADHD yourself, how did you find that experience of talking to people that were dismissive? Like,
I think for me, I think for me, I know that there's a lot of people who are quite ignorant anyway, and for me, the most important thing has always been education. But I'm quite passionate about making knowledge quite accessible, and I feel like even if you don't come from an educated background, you should have access to the knowledge. So I didn't get offended, but I was quite shocked that so many people said this stuff. But at the same time, I almost wasn't, because it's stuff you see online. The articles saying, oh, ADHD, people are just saying it for things like for likes on social media, or people are self-diagnosing. So I wasn't shocked and I wasn't offended. But I felt like that was the right thing to gather to prove, because I think a lot of people who believe that ADHD is a thing, there are people who, even though they believe it's a thing, and someone like me talks about it openly and explains it, they say, well, why? Why do you need to do that? You just have ADHD. That's just the way you are. And then when you say, well, some people don't believe that it's a thing, they think, well, obviously it's a thing. And I'm like, but you don't realize how many people don't believe what, people's experiences.
yeah,
So, I mean, although a lot of people know it's a thing, I think especially obviously younger generations, we all just know ADHD is a thing and it affects everybody. Not everybody understands it, but we're more aware of it.
yeah,
But I think sometimes we get caught up in the thing, well, I know about it, so why are you raising awareness about it when it's just a thing? But people are not aware that quite often when people don't understand, you get, people like me or people with ADHD get told a lot of discriminatory things, or accuse you of different personal failures and stuff like that.
yeah. I certainly like to see, you see a lot of it, like you say, in social media, because I'm part of, in a couple of ADHD groups on like Facebook, things like that. People that say they get the diagnosis, and they've been told in the past that like they've been told like they're lazy because they're unable to do something because of how their ADHD manifests. So I think it's not one of those kind of conditions where it's almost like, okay, you've got ADHD, that's fine. Like, we don't need to talk about it. We know you've got it, because it's understanding how it actually shows up, and
Yeah.
how to, especially I think in the work environment as well, understanding how it shows up in the workplace. And
Yeah, because that's the thing. I think on surface level, we all know this is ADHD, it's a thing. Actually, then you have a colleague who, let me think of an example. And then you have a colleague who kind of comes in 15 minutes late most days, and rushes in, and you're like, oh, can't they just be on time?
Mm.
But that colleague probably has ADHD. And then I think it's the realization of understanding that them being late isn't necessarily a personal failure, and they're not turning up to work saying, I don't care about this job, so I'm going to be late just to inconvenience, everybody around me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, got in the office all, stressed, and then they sit down, got there, and then they're being accused of not caring and being lazy or careless, but actually that person's already got a lot of internal shame about the fact that they are late. And that's not to say people with ADHD can't be on time.
Yeah.
But
it's understanding the reasons why behind it, isn't it? And not just a case of being late. Like, let's not make it about that. Well, why was you late? And
and finding ways around that if it's necessary somebody's on time, or making flexible adjustments. But that's the thing. People don't often put the two and two together. They don't understand that. I guess being late is quite a stereotypical thing. But there's a lot of other things, like, you might have a colleague that makes a lot of careless, small mistakes in stuff and might ask other people to look through them, through your work. And then that can be taken in, interpreted by somebody who doesn't understand as they're asking other people to finish off their work for them. But small careless mistakes are a symptom of ADHD. Is what happens.
Commentary.
And by people who don't necessarily quite understand how it actually shows up, they will blame or look at that person and be like, you're just being careless, lazy, or getting other people to do your work. But actually having someone else to proofread your work is a reasonable adjustment and is an accommodation. And this is why I made the series, is to kind of show those examples and say, I'm not making small little mistakes because I can't be bothered. I actually really want to do it right.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of shame of getting it wrong. That's why I'm going to get somebody else to proofread it. But it's not a personal failure. It's just because my brain genuinely has poor attention to detail. And that's why I made the podcast, because I wanted to myself have a resource where I can show how it manifests in real life. And actually, I got such a good response from it, because I had so many messages from people saying I cried on the first episode because for the first time I felt like somebody really understood how I feel.
Yeah.
Because I really showed the examples, like, of how it shows up in real life. And for me, that was the biggest thing I wanted to get out of it, because I felt like, yes, one, I got it right, hopefully. And two, I actually gave a resource to people, because people were telling me I'm going to send this to my family so they can understand me better.
Yeah.
And that's why I made it, because I'll give you an example. When I met my current boyfriend, he knew nothing about ADHD, and he's also Italian, so he didn't speak English very well, but he listened to each episode about 3 times to understand it. And on our third, maybe second day, he made a joke about ADHD. And I went home, and I liked him, but I went home and I was like, I should really tell him I don't like jokes about ADHD. So I was getting ready to tell him, like, I didn't really like the joke, because, people just don't realize it might be insensitive.
Yeah.
But before I even told him, we were walking, and he was like, he said, sorry, I listened to the 3rd episode of your series, and it was the stigma episode. And he said, and I felt really bad for making a joke about ADHD. I felt really guilty, because I realized that it's not a thing to joke about. And this is why I liked him, because, he actually listened to my series, and someone who, one, isn't English, first of all, with not perfect English, and second of all, someone who didn't understand ADHD heard my stuff, understood it, because it brought real life examples and explained them. And he understood how ADHD impacts somebody. And he then could reflect and say to me, oh my God, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize that it's actually that deep. Because people don't, and I never expect anyone to know. But that's why we're still together. Because I really appreciated that quality, that he could, reflect and listen. But this is what I hope everybody that listens to my series does. I'm not expecting anybody to be an expert, but if they can
It's
listen.
being open and wanting
Yeah.
to understand, isn't it? Because it can help so many people. I mean, there was a figure posted the other day about suspected 2 million people just in the UK alone suspect to have ADHD. It's like almost like 5% of the population
Yeah.
in the UK. So somebody's either going to be either have their boyfriend or girlfriend have ADHD, parents or someone they work with. So definitely, conversations like that and the show that you did, series that you did,
Yeah.
putting that out there
Yeah.
to help people understand how it shows up. Because I think that's the biggest thing, like you say, not, it's okay with the medical kind of definition, but that doesn't tell the whole story.
No.
That doesn't paint the whole picture. And this is why kind of I started the podcast to help educate people and and to help people with ADHD understand like why maybe they do certain things and how to help with those. And even myself from doing my own podcast, I've learned so much in just 2 months of doing it about ADHD and different people's experiences.
And that's what I think is so important, that, you can't say, oh, I have friends with ADHD, so I understand ADHD, or I know someone with ADHD, so I understand it. Because although everybody's different, what am I trying to say? Like, yes, like ADHD has the core kind of symptoms, but just because you know one person, it doesn't mean you understand the condition.
Everybody,
yeah, and you don't understand the full condition and the extent of it, because a lot of people mask, and I think I'm still kind of learning to unmask. I think I've gone a long way, but it's, people mask. So even when you're with your friends, you don't sit with your friends and say, I do this because I have ADHD. I mean, I do it. I do it with my friends because, I mean, my friends were very sick of me since I figured out about ADHD. I was like, oh my God, did you know I do this because of ADHD? And I do this because... So everybody around me was quite sick of me at some point, but most people don't do that.
No, most people sort of try, mask and reflect what...
Yeah, or they try to hide it more, or... I mean, I think people can be more accepting within themselves, but often people don't openly share with everybody. No. And this is the thing, when you know someone who has it, that doesn't necessarily mean you know the extent of it. And I think it's really important to learn the basics of ADHD and other conditions and neurodivergent conditions and even invisible disabilities, because, if you're friends with somebody, that doesn't mean they tell you everything. But if you have the knowledge and the basic understanding of how it works, you're then less likely to make a comment that will hurt your friend unintentionally.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be there and you'll be able to support your friend without them having to tell you that they struggle with something, because people are not always comfortable with sharing. I'm quite comfortable with sharing because I found it extremely fascinating figuring it out. And I loved, talking to people about it, and I still do. And everywhere I go, I'm like, I have ADHD, because I just feel like it's not something to hide.
No.
But again, there is that stigma. So I think it's really important that people know the basics, because, that way we're all kind of more educated. But also, the more we know about different kinds of people, the less we push people away or hurt people or kind of stigmatize people. Because I don't think there needs to be that stigma, because I think sometimes I'm quite happy to go and say, I have ADHD, I do this, I do it like this.
Not everyone, like you say, not everyone is wants to. I know when
but also if I do say it, I think that can sometimes, for those who don't understand the condition, they might then see me as maybe not able to do some stuff, or but I'm capable of doing a lot of things. But there's just some things that impact my executive functioning, which means that when it comes to planning my meals or eating or remembering to eat, I might forget.
Or leaving the house with everything that you need to.
So I think sometimes if I say I have ADHD and I do this, I think people then
assume that you can't do as much.
Yeah, or they might just immediately think because I need support with something like prioritization and organization, they might then think, well, I can't do the complicated stuff. But actually, I'm really good at the complicated stuff. It's just the really basic human things like eating and remembering to eat, or knowing which idea.
Yeah.
Or knowing what idea to do first,
Mhm.
or where to start with a project. That's it. But I literally just need to sometimes just verbalize it with someone, or someone to just say, okay, well, basically just start here. And then once I know where to start, I'm fine. But yeah, I just think sometimes people don't, because when they don't understand, they assume.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay if you don't understand, but just ask. Because the best thing that my manager has done for me in my job now, when I started, she actually asked me, she said, well, what do you mean? What's masking? And she said, well, how does that show up at work? And, and I really appreciated that, because instead of assuming something that she maybe didn't know about, she just asked me. And I don't get offended when people ask. I'd rather people ask than assume. And that's why, the series, I just wanted to provide a resource that anyone can listen to, whether they've got ADHD or not, or know someone with ADHD, because then that basic knowledge and understanding the stigma, that's available.
Go a long
and
way.
You can learn it. And when you know the basics, but then something comes up, I don't know, at work or with a friend or with a partner, if that comes up and they already know the basics, you can say, well, actually, this is, because
related to this, and
because they already have that basic understanding, they're like, oh, right. So then they can be maybe a bit more empathetic or compassionate with, the fact that you do something a certain way, rather than getting annoyed with you or thinking you're just really annoying because you forgot to hang up the laundry for the 5th time this week and it smells in the washing machine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And if my other half didn't understand ADHD, then I'd be in real trouble with that, because I've done that about 4 times just this weekend alone. So yeah, and
we all just put it on and then it stops, and my washing machine doesn't beep. So.
But so with your series that you've done, like I say, I've learned so much about ADHD, more than I already thought I knew, from doing the podcast. Did you learn anything while you was doing your series? Was there anything that like stood out? And what was like the biggest takeaway from doing your own series? Was there any surprises?
I think, first of all, when I started going around and talking about ADHD with the aim of finding people for the series, I kept coming across people going, oh, I'm going for an ADHD diagnosis. And it was people I wasn't never expecting to be, and it was just quite nice, especially because I always go to the gym, and the amount of people at the gym that had it, and I found so many people for my podcast in the gym, just because I think, again, people with ADHD like to move or get fixated on things like a certain kind of thing. And I do CrossFit. I used to do CrossFit then at the time. So a lot of people there were like, oh, I have it. Or the weirdest thing was, before I was doing the series, but I figured out I had ADHD at the gym, I was telling somebody, I was like, oh, I just figured out I have ADHD. Isn't it crazy? And she just looked at me and said, yeah, I knew since the day I met you. And I was like, what do you mean? And she just knew because of how I was, and her daughter has ADHD. And she's like, I just knew. And I was like, why didn't you tell me? But yeah, so it was, one was the fact that how obvious it was that I have ADHD, because the things I was learning, I was like, oh my God, how did nobody know? And yeah, but I think with the science, I think I already kind of knew most of the stuff through research, but I think learning stuff, especially about relationships, or things like learning about overstimulation, I didn't realize that, like, when I walk in a crowd, sometimes I just, and I'm walking with someone, I get quite annoyed with people internally, not, internally. And then realizing that I'm just overstimulated, that was a huge thing for me because I didn't realize that's what
Like feels
overstimulation
like,
felt
yeah,
like. And then you get kind of like agitated with everything.
yeah,
And so now, like me and my boyfriend, now we walked through town, and I was like, my dog was walking around, and then my boyfriend was like too near me, and then there was everyone around me, and I started getting. But now I can say, I'm really overstimulated right now. And then my boyfriend like takes me off to the side. He's like, right, well, we're gonna walk arm's length away from each other, and then we won't talk to each other until we get to the shop, because it's like, now I'm not gonna snap
yeah,
or get annoyed because I know I'm overstimulated. Whereas I think before I easily interpreted how I felt as just getting for no reason irritated with other people. And I think that was a big learning curve for me, and understanding that that's what overstimulation feels like. And I learned that through talking with other people
yeah,
and experts and people who know about it, because otherwise I didn't know. I
yeah.
thought I was just like always, don't know, just getting annoyed with everybody.
Yeah, it's those little things that I think, like you say, when the science behind it, but it's the little things about how it shows up, and even stuff like that. And the one thing I learned through doing this about my like low level of frustration. So you say when you get overwhelmed, especially in situations like that. So me and my other half, most of the time I really struggle with like going to Primark. It sounds the most.
That story I told you, it was on the way to Primark.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
See, usually it's in Primark, I get that, because it's
Yeah.
so. The thing for me is like
Too much.
it's the noise. It's more so like when it's like school holidays. There's a lot of bodies. It's really warm, and there's a lot of sound, because it almost feels like a. It's like a sound wall. It feels quite physical. The sound does, as weird as that might sound to some people, but that's what how ADHD can show up. And when, like you say, with the crowds as well, like not being able, if someone's walking really slow, you're like, I just want to get to where I want to get to. And I've always been like that, and it's only really now that I haven't got this conversation. So when I used to go to university in High Wycombe, and used to have to go through London, and which is obviously very fast paced. Usually, most time, like just go where they know where they're going, and I like to just do that, and everyone's heads down, just goes from A to B, and that's the way I like to be, not like a leisurely stroll. And that's what it was like in the small town where I came from. And I remember my mum used to say, she's like, how do you do it? Like, how do you take yourself off? And it's like, it's just, it's what I like doing. And it's only apparent now that the fact that I like to just get to where I'm going, and don't want to be amongst the crowds, it is really like, especially even then going back to uni when I had no idea what ADHD was, or even that I might have ADHD. So
Yeah, and I always avoided big crowds. I don't like going to really crowded places, and I think now I understand it.
Yeah.
Because now I understand that I'm just overstimulated, whereas I never thought I was ever overstimulated. It wasn't a word, like I knew the word, but it wasn't something I would ever use.
Yeah.
And now I understand that I really experience it quite a lot, and I can see throughout my life, how I just always get overstimulated in a way. Like today, I was doing a mobility class, and it's at a gym, and there's like about 8 people maximum booked on, and a coach talking. And there's music on, that's fine. But then there was this massive fan in the corner of the room, about this big, and it was on, and we got like 5 minutes into the class, and I just got up and went and turned it off. And then someone was like, "Is it a bit loud?" And I was like, "I just can't." Like, it's just that extra layer of the noise of the fan.
Yeah.
Was just so annoying, that and the feeling of it blowing everyone. It was just so irritating, and I was like, I'm just trying to relax here. So I just turned it off, and that was just today, and every day it'd be like, if there's too many like layers of sound for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, through doing the podcast, I understood this stuff, and now I'm like, when I explain it, I feel like some people just absolutely don't get what I'm saying. But yeah, if there's like too many layers of sound, so I'll be okay having a conversation, and I'd be okay having music in the background and having a conversation. But then if there's music, a conversation, and my washing machine is on spin, that's it. I can't. The music has to come off because it's like 3 layers
Yeah.
and it's too much. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And certainly, I know, speaking earlier about networking, going to like big events, if there's loads of, I find it quite difficult if there's quite a few different conversations going in close proximity
Mhm.
while I'm trying to have a conversation, because naturally, as your mind does, it floats, it like catches everything, like every bit of sound. And I really struggle to focus on what somebody's saying, but also then like hear them properly as well.
Yeah.
Because I'll hear like a word somebody else has said, maybe because they've said it in like a higher tone or different pitch or something like that, and then I'm not in this conversation. I find that really difficult at times, and like say, it's it is that feeling of being
Yeah.
overwhelmed.
And I think the most interesting thing I've learned was that I was told that ADHD, which stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, actually a lot of experts said that it's got the wrong name
Yeah,
because it's not an attention deficit, it's
it's,
an inability to regulate your attention and
yeah,
choose what you're focusing on. So that's the thing, like, you know, I will be like, for example, at work, we'll be recording a social media video, me to camera talking and remembering literally like 2 lines. I can remember 2 lines, and I actually know the story inside out because I've edited it for the past 2 days, so I know the story.
yeah,
But we stood outside in a busy street, and I'm trying to, 1, focus on looking in the camera, 2, remember the lines that I've written down, and 3, there's a lot of sounds like of cars going around, and then every time, but if behind the person who's recording me, if there's a person walking by, immediately that train of thought, it's like the script is here, and then I see a person, and then it's like that, and I have these 2 strands of thought, but I can't now speak the lines because I saw a person there, so my brain just got like derailed into a completely different direction, and now I'm aware of the fact that I'm not looking at the camera anymore, and now I
and then you're
slowed down what I was saying, so I didn't say it in the right tone, and then I keep stopping because every time, and then the traffic light goes off for people to cross, and I'm like, oh, you know, and I know it's really stereotypical to say that when people with ADHD, because people think you see a squirrel and you're like, oh, squirrel, and it's not quite like that, but it's
the funny thing is,
to see things.
somebody
And you do look away.
yeah. I was speaking with someone who has ADHD the other day, and we were sat, and it was like there was a bit of greenery in the background, and there was a squirrel, and he goes, "Oh, squirrel!" So yeah, it does happen in real life as well, but it is, yeah,
It is stereotypical, but at the same time, in
real
other
life.
scenarios, it does happen because it's not the fact that you see a squirrel and you're like, oh, squirrel, but it's more the fact that you don't choose
Yeah,
what you're focusing on.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I found really interesting learning from my podcast, is finding out from experts that it's not an attention deficit, because we're actually paying attention to too many things,
yeah.
too many things around us, and anything there's a new noise here, so your brain immediately gets hooked on that, even if that's interesting. And I guess, and this is where I think people in relationships can really struggle, because you're in a relationship and let's say you're both really in love with each other, right? But the person with ADHD suddenly, like, you're having a conversation and you're telling them something serious, and suddenly they hear a noise that's interesting. I'm not saying what your partner's saying isn't interesting, but just because something happened over there, you get immediately just distracted,
yeah.
because you want to pay attention to both of those things, because your brain just doesn't tune out the background noise.
Yeah.
And I think if your partner doesn't understand that, then they can get offended.
Like ignorance, or can absolutely assume that you're not interested in them.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
this is the thing, like in my relationship, like my boyfriend knows that sometimes he'll tell me stuff and then I'll go off on a tangent. As long as he just reminds me, I was actually telling you this, I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, I do care. I really do care about what you're telling me.
Yeah.
But I just got distracted, and it's not because I don't want to hear it, it's because my brain just
goes off
somewhere else. And that doesn't mean I don't care, because I really do care actually, but my brain just doesn't filter things out. Yeah. And that includes thoughts. I think what people don't get is, okay, we're in a quiet room so I will focus now. That doesn't mean if we're having a one-to-one conversation now, suddenly I will be like 1,000,000% focus. Because actually, we might be talking and you might say a word that will prompt a different thought.
And in your head,
immediately, because I'm so impulsive, I'll forget that you were talking. I'm like, oh, by the way, this, because I now remembered something I wanted to tell you. And it might not be the appropriate timing or the appropriate moment to change and remember, but if I don't tell you now, I'll forget again. And it just comes out. And I guess people might not get that because people might think, oh, well, we're in a quiet room. What are you getting distracted by?
Yeah.
But your thoughts also count as distractions because I guess other people can filter these
thoughts,
non-related thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was having a similar conversation about that, the thought process and your brain running at like 100 miles an hour with all different thoughts. And like you say, it's, especially growing up, like I knew that my brain was like that. And I was like, does everyone's brain work like this? Surely not. And it turns out, no, it doesn't. It's ADHD. But yeah, and having those thoughts, but it's almost like I refer to it as like a belt in an airport where you're waiting for your suitcase, and like there's a thought, and you know, if you don't get it then and there, then it's gone, but you don't know how long for.
Yeah, and it will come back, but you
at the most random time.
Yeah.
So if you don't get it out there, then it's going to come back at a time. Then it will probably be more of an inconvenience, and then it means you're going to be distracted somewhere else because.
Yeah. And the thing that somebody said in my series was, because I asked people to describe it in a creative way, so not just saying, oh, it's an inability to focus. I wanted like creative things to compare to something that everyone can understand.
Yeah.
And somebody said that it's like the movie title, is it Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, that's so true, because that's how I feel all the time, because I want to be everywhere and do everything, but it has to be all at the same time. And I think, again, people don't understand that ADHDers struggle with being able to kind of
maybe prioritize.
Yeah. And think, okay, I have this idea, I'm going to do it next week, because no, in your brain, it has to all happen now.
Yeah.
And this is kind of, for example, at work, I have one-to-ones regularly to prioritize and set timelines that are broken up into steps so that I know, okay, this week I'm doing this, and if I have time, I'll do a bit of this, but I don't need to do all 5 story ideas in one day.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that took a lot of learning for me, because often I would just go and be like, oh, I need to go do this and set up this and go this. But then you just get 1, burnt out and 2, overwhelmed. And then you can't finish everything to as high standard as you could otherwise. So yeah, and my job now, they were very big on me doing one thing at a time, which is great, because now I know, right, I can do one thing at a time. And I have a system where I have a bit of a piece of paper. I write all the story ideas on it. And on top it says, don't forget. I blue tack it to the side, and I don't look at it. It sometimes just doesn't exist, because if I'm not looking and it's there too long, it's part of...
It's like a wallpaper, isn't it?
But I do check it when I need to remember, like when I need to have some ideas, I look at that, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. And it's helpful. But I had to find these strategies. But I think I was really good my whole life, actually, with accommodating myself. Like the way I would study for exams was very ADHD friendly. Like I would condense the textbook stuff into the only relevant stuff. So I would literally handwrite out the notes. Then I would condense them even more. Then I would make a mind map of only the relevant stuff. But the way my brain works is one word can prompt memorizing the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I would condense until I condensed it into 1-word things. Because if I had 1-word prompts, I know my brain then goes, oh yeah. So it's just knowing how you work. And I guess if someone grows up being told, you have to study like this, and I never had this, because, for example, my granddad and I would study together, but he always encouraged me to work how I work, and he always encouraged me to, you know, do things how they kind of in a way that works for me. But I think if you're growing up and being told you have to study in this way, you might not even know the way that works for you.
Yeah.
So, for example, me, to do the ADHD story, I would make huge timelines. They had to be physical timelines. Or my first documentary that I made a piece of paper that long to my nose, and it was the whole documentary on paper with post-it notes in order, with notes where the time code for this piece was, and I would stick them around and be like, does that work? And I'll be like, actually I want to, but I had to figure it out to do the post-it notes, because first I did it in Sharpie and then I was like, damn, I
can't remember. Yeah.
now. So it took me 2 tries, but that method worked so well. So now I do that when I need to, work on a big story. I will work on post-it notes. But it is weird, I'll be in an office with these huge papers all stuck together and a million post-it notes, and people walk past and think, well, what are you doing? That's not the way we all work,
Yeah.
But that's just how I work. But I was always quite comfortable with the way I worked, and I thought I kind of hyper-focus on these timelines, and I enjoy it. So I kind of owned it before I knew I had ADHD. I just thought that's just how I work. But when I figured it out, I kind of could, say this. I do this because it helps me process. Because actually, for me, now I understand the handwriting is a bit of movement, and I think it seals whatever connections in my brain. It seals that thought in.
Yeah.
And because I've written it out loud or verbalized it out loud,
it sinks in a bit more. And it's really interesting you say that, because I have the same thing at work. So I was talking about my boss at work, or my boss at work was telling the rest of the team, like, I think it was a to-do list. So it's like to do application on Microsoft, on Outlook. It's like, yeah, you can put these in and so you know everything to do. And I did that. I tried it for a week and I found it really difficult, because my way of working that works best for me, and which I think I started it just after I found out or realised I had ADHD, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. I have to write everything. So I have a daily book, and I'll write everything down that I need to do, and add bits along the way. But it is that writing that helps it stick in my head, but also having that visual as well, because with the problem with the to-do, I mean, you're working on a screen anyway, and like everything's a distraction on the screen. I have 30 tabs open at one time. But then also you can click off it, and then once it's gone away, it's like it's not there anymore. So the way I find best to work is then to, once I've done a task, I will colour it in green, or unless I lose my green highlighter, which I generally do. And I find that it's weird, because it almost gives you like a little bit of dopamine as well, like ticking it off.
So that's what I learned as well. And because since I used to always write a list, because without a list, I could never. It just doesn't work. And I knew that from school and studying, and I always did really well at school, but it's because I managed to find those
ways of working. It's not something a lot of people are able to do, is it?
And but then when I found out I had ADHD, I understood that sometimes, writing down, work on this story is too broad. And I realized, okay, well, if I say, research this or contact this person, and then the next step is record this interview, and then the next step is cut down the interview, and then I realized I even will put a step in to import the interview, because it's such an effort task for me to do that I always procrastinate between recording it and editing, because that sending it is an extra step. So now when I add that little step in to my to-do list, I can cross it off, and I'm like, right, I've done that. And I figured out that breaking it down into smaller steps helps a lot. And that's something that I didn't necessarily do before knowing I had ADHD, but I definitely do it now, because I understood how an ADHD brain kind of works. So I'm like, right, well, smaller steps are more manageable, so I'm going to break things down. But I think, if you've never figured out to, make a timeline or a to-do list because somebody told you this is how you have to do it, you might just not even be aware that that works for you. And I think that's the sad thing, that when people don't understand ADHD, people are taught are told to work in a certain way and do things a certain way. And that's where people then just struggle to get things done. Whereas just letting people
having that bit of freedom to find out what works for you. And I know speaking to someone else, one of our other guests on the show was saying there's no set system exactly for, like, there's a million systems that you can come up with and to help in different situations for different things, because one system just it's not a permanent fix.
Yeah, and then I think I always say things always work till they don't. So like one day I might hyper focus and I have a way of doing something, right? So I'm like, okay, this is the
new me. This is what I'm gonna do going forward.
The strategy that actually works. So then you do it, and then you do it. And so I did this with food. I used to write down, like, I used to have a meal plan.
Yeah.
But not like a meal plan. It was just like 2 or 3 recipes that I could just meal prep for the whole week, and then just not think about food for the rest of the week. And that worked great. But then after a few months, I was just like, I hated Sunday because I had to make the same meal every day. And so it worked for a few months until it really didn't. Or for example, at work, I decided I will always have, and to be fair, my boss helped me. She said, right, because I kept forgetting to eat. She said, right, well, what can we do at work to help with this? And we kind of decided every day at 1, I'll have my lunch, and this would be like my food hour. But then eventually I'm like, I feel like restrained by this food hour. I'm like, I feel like I have to sit in this kitchen every day, 5 days a week, and eat the same soup that I meal prepped on Sunday. So I think everything does work with ADHD until it kind of doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
And I think having ADHD is what I've learned now is that you have to just be really flexible, and those around you have to be flexible, because they might try to help you and it will work, but like
for a time.
Yeah, but everyone in this ADHD situation has to be flexible, because things work and then they stop working, and those around you can't get annoyed because it's not your fault, but also you also need to be okay with the fact, like, right, well, that's not working anymore. What can I do differently now to help me with this task or this problem, or whether it's cleaning or meal prepping, because now I hate meal prepping, so now I just come up with the simplest thing: yogurt, berries and granola, and I will just have that, because that way I don't have to meal prep anything. Is the least amount of steps, because I'm sick of spending all Sunday cooking every week. And I think eventually improvising this yogurt, granola and blueberry thing, I'm going to get
wear off,
and then I might go back to making soup every day. Do you know what I mean? But we all have to be flexible in this situation, because I think that's what I learned. It's like you have to be flexible within yourself when you have ADHD, because you can be quite rigid, can't you, when you have ADHD as well with yourself, because you have a lot of shame around within yourself that you do everything wrong or something doesn't work. But when you have it and you have it and you understand it, you just need to let go of that shame and be like, it's okay, it doesn't work anymore. Now I'm just going to change it up or research some stuff that might work now. But also those around you need to be flexible, like, whoever you live with, your partners, your colleagues, because they'll go, well, hang on a second, 2 weeks ago you told me this was the solution, but now you're saying it doesn't work. And they'll get frustrated with you. But if they understand ADHD, they'll be like, okay, well, now what can we do?
Yeah.
And it's about people being flexible. But I think
it comes back to that awareness that we was talking about before, doesn't it? Having those open conversations, being open about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Talking about how it shows up.
Yeah.
Definitely, because it's the ultimate complex of ADHD. I think it's trying to find the solution, and then it eventually not working because it becomes monotonous, or there's just no interest in it.
Dopamine wears out from that strategy.
Yeah.
And then once the dopamine is gone, because it's not new, novel, and exciting anymore, which are the main 3 things you need to do things, then it's kind of gone now. Maybe it'll work again in 5 weeks, 5 months' time, but now the dopamine's, gone, it doesn't work. And everybody around just needs to be flexible, because I think this is the thing. It's about understanding that. So what did this one expert said? I think Sally Cubbin. She said people with ADHD are consistently inconsistent, and I think I really like that because it kind of explains it. Because the consistent thing about the condition is that you are inconsistent, and I think that, you know, for me, that captured it really well, because I never thought about it like that before.
Yeah.
But it is, because again, you might get into a routine and then suddenly you don't have this routine, or you might be really good at this one thing and then suddenly struggle with a really basic thing, you know. And it is that inconsistency that's the kind of part of having ADHD.
Yeah.
And I think that's frustrating, not just for people around you, but for yourself.
Yeah. Saying about the shame part as well, it is very, you can be very hard on yourself as well, more so necessarily if you don't have ADHD, because you are trying so hard to make some things work. And like you say, the solutions that you'll put in for a bit and they work, but then they don't work. And there's a sense of like frustration and disappointment in yourself.
Failed, like,
yeah, they're like, why can't I do this when everybody else, like Bob and Mai, do this at work, but then I try and do it and I can't do it more than 2 weeks.
Exactly. And I think this is what happened for me when I was doing the CBT therapy. And then I figured out I had ADHD, and she said, well, what would a diagnosis kind of do for you? Why would you need a diagnosis? And I said to her, I think I would just stop getting so frustrated about not being able to stay on top of everything. Because now, and I've done a lot of ADHD coaching before, and that really helped me, because now I'm able to just say, okay,
it's fine, let it go.
I don't need to go to the gym every single day. I mean, I love the gym and it's my biggest thing, but I've learned that I don't need to go every day, for example, because with ADHD, again, you're very all or nothing. But now I'm able to say, okay, today I've basically used up all my brain power at work. I'm just going to go for a dog walk, come home, eat, and instead of adding more to my overwhelm, trying to rush in and out from the gym and walk the dog and eat dinner and shower and wash my hair and then go to bed, I'm just going to take it easy, because I've learned that I can't do everything. And most people can't. Like, you know, it's that whole issue with being perfect and having everything and coping with everything. Most people can't cope with everything. But I think with ADHD, we have less of a tolerance for kind of doing if we do too much, we can easily burn out. And so now,
then we're at a level where we're not coping with anything.
Exactly. Really. And I think now I'm just a bit more understanding with myself to just say, like, okay, I didn't eat the perfect healthy meal today. Like, I love healthy cooking, but it's okay. Now I go to a shop and I have, you know, those microwavable packets of rice, and you can get these frozen prawns with a thing with protein, whatever. It's healthy. It's not perfect, because I personally, you know, don't think that's the right thing to eat all the time, because I love kind of healthy eating. But I also now know, I'm like, I have ADHD. I don't need to home cook a meal every single day to be healthy. But also, what's going to happen if once a week I don't make an effort to cook a massive meal with 500 steps? It's okay if I don't love microwaving food, but it's okay if once a week I just make a simple meal from the freezer. I still wouldn't make like a ready-made meal for myself, because I have this thing. I also grew up in Poland and everything's home cooked. So I think I have a lot of shame of not like home cooking everything, but now I'm like, okay, well, it's fine if once a week or twice a week I microwave these prawns with something and add it to some microwavable rice, because that's 2 steps instead of boiling the water and putting the rice in and draining the rice and then cooking prawns on a pan and then washing up everything. Whereas this, you just microwave it, put it all together, and that's it. It's like 3 steps, not 15. And that's okay, because, you know, you don't need to do everything perfectly.
Yeah.
And that is the shame, you know, around, is that you're not perfect. But actually, a big part of it is, you know, I think having ADHD and being told you're doing something wrong all the time and then trying to stay on top and doing everything right, that gives you so much shame because you deep down know, like, this is too much. I don't want to do this. I can't, and I'm drained. Why is nobody else drained from doing the basic stuff? But like after doing coaching, I'm like, it's okay if I didn't hit this many grams of protein today, because I realized when I track food, I get really overwhelmed because that's an extra task.
Yeah.
But do I need to know how much I'm eating if I feel good? No. Do I need to weigh myself? No. So I've got rid of all the tracking stuff and trying to eat enough protein. And I just kind of roughly go, okay, as long as my meal has protein, carbs, and some fiber, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. As long as I feel like I've eaten enough so that I don't have a meltdown because I didn't eat.
Yeah.
Because obviously eating helps you kind of, your blood sugars, when they're balanced, you can regulate your emotions better because you just have more energy because you've eaten. So as long as I've eaten, and sometimes that meal might look like just microwaved rice, the 2-minute rice packets, and that's okay, but on days where I feel like I have more capacity to cook healthy stuff, I will. But it's about going, it's fine. I don't have to make a matcha tea with the fancy whisk every morning.
Yeah.
You can just have a green tea, or you can just get to the office and have a tea at work. It's okay. Like, you don't always have to get everything right.
Yeah, and it can be really difficult. I know when I used to, I had a problem with when I go to work, and I when I do go to the gym in the evenings, and sort of about 5, half 5, 6 p.m. And some days I would like have a really draining day at work where maybe there's been a lot of noise, or it's been quite overwhelming, used a lot on my brain capacity or something like that, and it was just so difficult. But then if I didn't go to the gym, then I would just like beat myself up about it so much, and like, why am I not keeping this up? This is what like everyone does.
Yeah.
So it's really,
But it's
quite
okay.
difficult.
And that's the thing, actually, because there are days where I'm drained, but I know if I go to the gym, I'll feel better. Because exercise gives you a lot of dopamine. So sometimes if I feel tired, but I know I am able to do stuff, I might do something low intensity or whatever, but I will still go out and move. And I think that's the best thing for anyone with ADHD to do, is to go outside and move, or go to, like, because sometimes gyms are overwhelming and overstimulating, but on those days where I feel like it's too much, I'll just go outside with the dog and just go for a walk, or go to a yoga class, or do yoga at home. But I don't love doing it on my own because body doubling. I need other people to tell me to do it. But the thing is knowing that I have like in my head, I'm like, right, well, if I've gone to the gym, if I trained 3 times in a week, it doesn't matter which days it is. And I still beat myself up, like, oh, because I had this plan in my head that on Wednesday on Tuesday I do this, on Thursday I do this, and on Friday I do this, the classes. But then, now I'm like a bit more able to kind of be like, it's fine. Work was a lot today and you came back extremely drained. So it's fine if you didn't go. That doesn't mean you failed. It just means today it wasn't the right day. But if in the next 2 days I go twice, or if I've gone 3 or 2 times, it's okay, because I've still moved, but I listen to my body better. And I think people with ADHD now need to be kinder to themselves and just say, it's okay, I'm a human, and my executive functioning doesn't function as it does in other people. So you just need to be, nicer to yourself and be like, okay, it's fine. And this is what I always say, because me and my boyfriend are both quite neurodivergent, and I think whatever neurodivergence we both have is the same. So he would get really like stressed or frustrated about missing a workout, and he used to be quite perfectionist, but then obviously since we started seeing each other and he understood it better, now he calls me out on the perfectionism. He's like, well, you don't have to do all of this, it's okay, you're tired, just take a break and it's okay. So I think it's about realizing you don't have to achieve all these things. And also, because the executive functioning part of your brain doesn't function as it should be functioning, that's why you find things more difficult and more draining, because it genuinely takes so much to get out the door. And, you know, for me, like, transitions are really hard. So getting in and out the door. So if I had to go in the house 15 times, I'd rather just leave, not come back for ages, and then come back once. But then that means I forget to eat. And then and then I'll have to buy food. And then this is how you waste more money, because the faffing around and stuff. So I think it's about just being kinder to yourself and just going, okay, well, I need to just stay out and I'm just going to buy food. And I didn't fail with all the budgeting just because I bought some food out, you know. So yeah, it's about kind of, that's the main thing I learned, is to just be nicer to myself about not getting things perfect. Because actually, you know, when I do things I'm passionate about, I do them right, and it's okay. So I don't need to get frustrated that, okay, I might miss some words in an email just because my brain thinks faster than my hands type. But then when I produce a documentary that I'm really interested in, you know, it's really good, and I'm hyper focused in and all in, and I will do it to the best of my ability because I'm passionate about that.
Yeah.
And now that
level of interest is higher, yeah.
Yeah, and now that I understand that ADHD, like, people with ADHD have an interest-based nervous system, I'm like, well, that makes so much sense, because I've always gone around, I would always find ways to not do things that I wasn't interested in, just somehow. Like, even in school, I would figure out and know, right, these 5 subjects, because, you know, you needed 5 GCSEs. I was like, right, well, I'm really good at school, but I absolutely don't like science. And so I was like, well, I don't need to pass science, because I knew for a fact I would pass English and, you know, all the other subjects that I was really passionate about. Yeah, so I knew that I would pass the subject I was really passionate about, because I was interested, and I love things like sociology and media studies and English, so I would do really well in those. And I was like, well, that's 5, and I know I'm not going to fail them because I'm really interested and I do really well in those. So, well, and I knew I had to, for example, I hate maths, but I knew I had to pass. So I just kind of made sure, it was very tactical for me. I made sure I passed it, but I didn't, like, get hung up on the fact that I didn't get an A star in, like, science, because I don't want to be a scientist.
Yeah.
But now it makes sense why I always kind of gone around, just always found a way to do the things I'm interested in,
yeah.
and not have to do the things that I didn't find interesting.
Because it can be really hard to actually get stuck in. And I know we were talking about, like, video editing earlier, and, like, my least favourite part of the podcast, because it's difficult and it's something I don't particularly enjoy, but, like, recording, doing the episode, speaking to people, really enjoy that. Happy with that. I could talk to all the guests, like, all the time, and pay someone else to do my video edit. This channel's not quite there yet, but yeah, it's I think typically for people with ADHD, it's so much harder to start something. And I think, speaking to a lot of people as well with similar experiences, especially with education as well, things like homework and leaving stuff to the last minute, leaving homework to last minute, exam revision, unless you realise that yourself.
Yeah.
It's quite typical with someone with ADHD, leaving it to the last minute when you really, really don't want to do it. And it's just that sense of
But even
pressure.
if I liked sociology, I would still know the point where it was almost too late to start studying, and that's only then I would start. It was only when it was urgent. Even though I loved sociology, learning all the case studies was just effort for my brain. And unless it was urgent and I had to do it because I only had, like, 7 days, I would somehow, and my mum used to joke how I study like a crazy scientist because I make all these mind maps, but that's where I would, like, really get stuck in and make all the mind maps and condense all the information and be just only focused on that. But if it wasn't urgent, I couldn't get myself to do it. And yeah, and it really makes sense now about the interest kind of based nervous system, because it all makes sense now why I do it, how I do it. And I think that's one thing at work manager gets right, is the fact that if I'm really interested in a topic that will make a good story, they do let me explore that and get stuck in that,
Yeah.
because they know that they will get the best out of me when they let me do that, when I can focus and when I can just, and if my brain is hooked on it, you're getting like 110% from me. But if we leave it and then you tell me in 5 weeks to do it, I might not be as interested anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because again, like consistent, or is it consistently inconsistent as well? That interest base. Speaking with someone the other day about like meeting up, like, do you want to go out and have a drink at a pub in 2 weeks? I'm like, I don't know if I'll be up for it in 2 weeks. If you ask me now, and if I'm in the mood now, I'll do it now. But I can't guarantee I'll have that same interest in doing that thing like 2 months down the line.
I always say, like, people with ADHD have we live in the now and the not now. And that's the only 2 time zones we have. So it's like, do you want this from me now or not now? Because if you don't want it now,
forget about it and get,
yeah. But if you want it now, I'll do it right now, this second. And I think that's like what people often don't understand is for me, it's not like, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to do it in 3 days. I'm like, I want to do it now.
Yeah.
But now I've learned that I'm like, okay, I have this idea and I'm able to reflect because I know this is what I do. I know I end up, doing everything right now. So now I am aware of this. So I write down my ideas and try to remember them. But it's still not easy. It's not a thing I can just switch in my brain and go, oh, add an extra few time zones in there. It's just the now and the not now.
Yeah.
And I think if you have ADHD, once you understand that, you can kind of learn to work with it. But again, if you don't have the resources and the knowledge about how your brain works, you're never going to learn and you're never going to help yourself unless you have the resources, like, for example, my podcast or your podcast or any other podcast that educates, or academic resources, but they're quite hard to read, aren't they?
Yeah, especially with someone. It's kind of the ironic thing that a lot of information about ADHD is in books, and traditionally people with ADHD don't really enjoy consuming books because it's quite a long drawn period. I know for myself, like even though I've read kind of like all the Harry Potter books and the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, and other various series, but I've done that in like stints where I've been really interested and like really focused on reading. Like I really enjoy it, and I'll be like halfway through a book and get disinterested and put it down and not pick up for like a year. And it's so I think in forms of like media, I think definitely like with podcasts and more visual or audible podcasts, it's easier to digest.
Yeah, because then you can walk around and listen to it.
Yeah.
And engage with it better rather than just be forced to sit down and sit still. Because, for example, for me, when I read a book, I have to really enjoy the book. So, for example, I now learned that if it's a book that, because I'm in a book club, if it's a book that I don't specifically want to read, but it's in the book club, so it's got a deadline, so I know I have to finish it by then, I will listen to that book because, I don't know, for me to sit down and read a book, I want to read a book that I feel like it's worth really focusing for.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I read 1984, and then there's like another book, someone based another book on 1984 by George Orwell. I love that book and it was so well written, and that I think that's worth. To be honest, actually, I listened to 1984, but it was a really good book. So the second one I bought and I read in a physical copy.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed reading it. But I think now I've learned that if I'm going to sit down and read, I don't want to read a book that isn't worth the focus. And if I'm not interested, I realize that I'm forcing myself to read something that I'm not enjoying. It feels like a punishment, and 2, I just can't get through it.
Yeah.
Whereas if I walk around and listen to it, I can go for a dog walk and just listen to the book. And I think, again, this is like, instead of being angry with myself that, oh, why can't I just finish the book club book? I'm like, okay, I purchased the physical book, but clearly I can't get on with it. It might be an all right book, but it doesn't quite hit my interest.
Yeah. Do you find, like, as well, I know I had this, when you read a book and you are struggling to get through it, whether it's like you've had enough reading or not interested in the book, do you find yourself reading it or reading sentences multiple times for it to sink in? Because yeah, by that point, like I've probably read like 3 books, and that's when I know where to put it down.
Yeah, because you're reading and suddenly you're like going through the words, but your main focus is now your thoughts about something else, like, oh, I really want to eat this later today, and then you're not, and I'm like, oh no, what did I just read?
What actually happened in the book? Because I read the words.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
Yeah, but yeah, so definitely audio books and podcasts as well. That's definitely the way to go, I think. Like, obviously, you work in media. What can the media, in terms of helping with like awareness of ADHD, the condition, what part do you think that has to play in helping reduce the stigma around ADHD, just helping people understand it generally?
I think, and this is what I think, I learned this at uni, and I think actually journalists and journalism should be doing this, and I don't think it's always. I think the media doesn't always get it right, but I think this is what I learned at university, is that whatever we make, whether it's a report for politics or whether it's something about research or just whatever it is, anything, whatever story we're telling, it should be told in a way that's understood by everybody. And this is what I'm really passionate about, because, you know, if you're a political journalist and you report on whatever's happening in politics, but you're using jargon, so really complex scientific politics related language that only people who understand politics will understand, that's not accessible for the general public, because a lot of people in the working class might have not had the same level of education as somebody, you know, who grew up in a house that was really big on politics, because the focus might have just been on something else, and now that working class person might not understand what they're talking about, or what's being said, because they might not actually understand the whole political system. So now they don't understand what's going on around them. And I feel really strongly that in the media, we shouldn't be using jargon, so complicated subject specific language, because when you take that out, and at my uni, they used to always drill it in our heads, what, like, if you explain it as if you're telling your mate at the pub about something. So if we're in a pub and I'm telling you about ADHD,
is it your round?
Yeah, it's my round. I don't drink, but it's my round. I bought us all a cup of tea, and now I'm like, right, well, you know, when it comes to ADHD, and if I was there and I suddenly started saying things like, well, it's an executive functioning disorder and the prefrontal cortex doesn't function as well.
Even I'd turn off, and I've got
You lose
ADHD.
complete interest. Yeah. You lose interest because, not you lose, but the people around you lose interest because they don't know the language you're using. And this is what the media really, like, this is what I try to do. This is what I try to do with my series, the that ADHD story, is to take those concepts and say, well, did you know that ADHD is something that we call an executive functioning disorder, which is a disorder that affects the frontal part of your brain, in the front of your brain. And that part of the brain is responsible for things like organization and planning and time management and things like that. So because that part of your brain doesn't work as well as it should be, that means you will struggle to maybe organize projects or do things like this. If I say it to you like that, yeah, if I say it to you like this, you're more likely to engage with me because you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I didn't know this, right? Or you might say, oh, I understand that now. And now I've opened up a conversation, because now I can talk to anyone who doesn't understand. And I think people who are in the media need to understand what they're talking about really well to be able to translate it into human form, human language. And that's why I did that ADHD story, to kind of create that resource that it's a resource that will kind of like work for everybody, not just for those people who already have a knowledge of kind of neurodivergent conditions or how they work. I wanted it to be understood by everybody, because that's what I learned at uni that was really important. And I think sometimes that gets forgotten. I think it's really easy as somebody who knows a lot about a topic to use that kind of
certain jargon,
and it's not done intentionally at all. But I just believe that if for us to be able to raise awareness or educate people better about things like ADHD, the language just needs to be simpler. Because if I start throwing around ADHD jargon at people who don't know anything about ADHD, I haven't taught them anything, but I haven't also created an environment where
people can learn.
Yeah, and then I haven't kind of, instead of creating a moment where I can say, look, you know, you might not understand me very well, but actually this is how my brain works. But if I start saying to you, well, I need body doubling because this is how I work better, but they don't know what body doubling is.
Yeah.
You know, body doubling means sitting with someone, not necessarily doing the same task together, but keeping each other accountable for the tasks, because that keeps a person with ADHD on track. It means that, you know, they can get things done because they know someone will check in on them, you know,
or even be able to verbalize ideas, just to, like I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, exactly. But if I say it like that, the person who didn't understand will be able to kind of understand, but also then can say, right, so in a normal situation, how does that look? And I could say, well, actually, if I have someone come over to my house just to talk to me, that means I can clean my kitchen because I can get it done because I know they're there. So it makes me kind of get on with it and clean. But if I'm on my own, I can't start that activity. And then you can kind of open up a conversation, start a dialogue. But if I start throwing around scientific language, one, it sounds like I'm just lecturing someone, and two, it doesn't create like an open conversation, because if I'm talking at somebody who doesn't understand, one, they can switch off, but two, also I think they can feel like they don't understand, and some people don't like not understanding things or admitting that they don't understand things. So if I use complicated language, they might be like, oh yeah, okay, rather than engage and discuss and have that dialogue. Because I think people can feel a bit out of their depth, you know, and I just think language should be approachable, not dumbed down, and I don't think we should patronize people.
No.
But, you know, somebody who never went to university can still understand ADHD in a complex way, but it doesn't mean they have to be explained it in a complicated way. We can explain things in a simple way, and I think that's what can be really done in the media more, is just in general, but especially when it comes to like neurodivergence, to just kind of explain it in a way that people can relate to and understand, because then it takes away that gap of language, because the language gap it's kind of, you know, it creates barriers if we're using scientific language. But if you take the scientific language out and talk in a human language, like you would talk to a friend in the pub, then it's, you know, more people will have the knowledge. And I just think I'm quite passionate about making knowledge more accessible.
Yeah, and you do that through social media as well. Talking about,
I try.
Same. Talking about obviously how neurodiversity shows up in real life situations as well, like your video the other day with sort of almost like a blooper outtake sort of thing, and it's really relatable as well. What part do you think kind of social media has to play in awareness as well? Because it feels like, from my opinion, I feel like with social media that's more about people's lives, and it feels, well, I was going to say it feels more relatable, but then there is some content on there that's like completely not relatable. But certainly I think through social media is probably a good platform for that, as opposed to kind of normal media.
Yeah, because like, for example, for me, I figured out with the ADHD stuff through social media. Doesn't mean I went and self-diagnosed myself watching 3 TikToks. You know, that's not what I've done. That was
Oh, you
not
didn't
true.
do that? Oh,
No,
that-
no, no. But I did see a few TikToks that said about ADHD, and they illustrated situations that I related to. I was like, oh, I do that.
Mm.
And that then made me think, do I have ADHD? And it wasn't like, well, I have ADHD because I don't go for a wee until the last bursting minute. But I was like, wow, somebody else does that, because I always thought I was quite weird for saying I hate going for a wee. It's but for me, it's like going for a wee was more like I'd be hyper focused, and going for a wee would just
take you away from
the focus away.
Yeah.
Like it would just get rid of the focus. So I just hate going for a wee.
Still do.
And I saw a video about ADHD, and that was one of the first videos that really made me think like, I do that, and nobody else seems to do that, but now this video says, and then I researched, and it is a thing. It is a thing.
Yeah.
It's a faffy thing that's annoying to do, and it's in the way of my day.
It's an inconvenience away when you're actually focused, isn't it?
And so I think, especially social media, I think for me, it's more showing people how it looks. So it's more about just saying it's okay to be authentic. This is what me being me looks like when I'm being authentic. Because I guess if I go to work, I am me, but I think I'm
toned down.
But when I go to the gym, for example, it's like I'm a completely different person, because I'm way more confident when I go to the gym. I talk to everyone. I'm friends with everybody. I will small talk with everybody, but it's not the same kind of small talk, because we can talk about the workout and the gym and what we're actually doing.
Do you think that's a sense of masking? Obviously, like in the workplace, feeling like have to be a certain way. So
yeah, and I think it's not necessarily that I have to mask, because you know, when I got the job that I have, I got hired, and I was really open about how I work. And I told them I have ADHD, and it wasn't a problem. But I think there's certain faffy things that I might do that I think I do tone down a bit. Although in my workplace now, I really don't mask as much as I could. But I think because I'm not as comfortable with everybody, because, you know, an office is a really busy place with everyone, and it's a professional environment, and people have different perceptions of how you should act in an office. But when I go to the gym is just adult playground, you know. My gym is like, you know, you do burpees, and you do jump over boxes, and you go for a run, and you try to be faster than everybody else. Like, it's a bit of fun. And because everybody in the gym is like a community, the gym that I go to, you know, you come in and I can say hi to everybody, and I don't feel uncomfortable about, I don't know, if I'm waiting around and having a rest, just moving or doing with spins or jumping or whatever, because nobody looks at me weird, because we're all at the gym and we're all moving. So it's not a weird thing to do. So I can fully unmask at the gym, I think, and I can really be how I am and how I really feel like I am. Whereas in places like, being in an office or a social environment where I don't know everybody, I feel a bit more closed off and I wouldn't just chat with everyone, because I think at the gym, if I just talk on and on and on, everybody else will just talk on and on and on. Like, we just chat and it's okay. And I think at work is like, sometimes I'm like, oh no, if I start talking, I'll talk for too long, and then you know, so it's maybe that. But yeah, when I go to the gym, I'm fully unmasked, and that's what I want to do on social media, is to kind of show this is what it looks like when I am authentically me, and this is how I show up when I am me. And, you know, for example, I did a post about these cowboy boots, and my whole life I was obsessed with clothes, and I would buy like a piece of clothing that was a bit, not like weird, but like not what a basic normal, whatever normal is, but not what everybody would wear. And it wouldn't really be that crazy, but I'd see it and I'd be like, that's dopamine, I want that. So then I'd buy it and then I'd wear it, and I'm like, wow, I stick out like a sore thumb. And then I'd feel really uncomfortable wearing it, because obviously rejection sensitivity dysphoria. sensitive dysphoria?
This-
RSD.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
just say RSD.
RSD.
So, and because, with ADHD, you have RSD, you think everybody's judging you and watching you and you're a bit more sensitive to criticism or feedback. And then I'd come back home and I'm like, I'm never wearing that again. And then I got these cowboy boots and I was like, I'm just going to wear, and I wore them and I took them with me to Italy to see my boyfriend. And authentically me wanted to wear the boots with denim shorts and a denim shirt. But then I was like, I'm meeting my boyfriend's friends for the first time. And I was like, I was anxious to wear these boots. And then I changed to these trainers and I didn't feel like what I wanted to wear. Like the outfit felt wrong. It wasn't what I wanted to wear. And I just had this moment and I was like, I can wear this, but I won't feel comfortable wearing this. Or I can wear the boots that they're giving me a lot of dopamine because it's just authentic to what I feel like and what I want to wear. And then I wore the boots and I made a decision because often I would just wear the trainers before. And I wore the boots and I felt really anxious, but like nobody has said anything about my boots. And so I posted about this on Instagram and like people have been messaging me like, oh, you've inspired me to wear this. And this is what I want to do because actually that is an example of RSD.
Yeah.
That is an example of trying like doing something a bit differently to what you want to do it like, just because you're scared.
It's being you rather than masking to your vibe.
Yeah, and then slowly, like I didn't realize that was.
Yeah.
But then I remember nearly changing the boots and I was like, you know what? I don't want to wear these trainers. I want to wear my new boots that I want to wear every single day now because I'm just hyper focused on them and they're giving me lots of dopamine. So I will wear them. And I really had to force myself to do it because I spent my whole life kind of trying to fit in. And, nobody said anything about my boots. And if anybody did, it was only like positive things. And nothing happened. So it's okay. And that's why I want to do it on social media because I do get messages from people saying like, oh, you made me want to wear my thing that I never wear. Or, oh, I love dopamine dressing, but I'm embarrassed. And that's what I want to do. I want people to look at me and be like, well, Patrycia's done it. And nobody said, she's so weird. I mean, people maybe do, I don't know. But, nothing happened. I wore the boots and I enjoyed it and I felt comfortable.
So how do you say if I impulsively buy, because we do, generally with ADHD, I've impulsively bought some shorts that I really look like the look of, I really want to wear, but then, like say, going out with friends or seeing family, and I'm thinking maybe I play it safe because I almost don't want to be me, if that makes sense. Don't want that to shine through. What advice would you give to me that would help me put on them shorts and go out in those shorts?
I would say in that moment, it was for me, that's what I've done. In that split second, I was thinking, like, if you change those shorts, will you feel like authentically you, or will you just feel comfortable in the social situation? You know what I mean? Because if you're changing something just to fit into a social situation, you're not being authentic to you because you want to wear that thing. And if the only reason you're changing it is because of other people's reactions, that's where I think you need to just say to yourself, I want to wear them and they are how I want to look. And that's how I look. And just because I look a bit different, or just because my dad will make a joke because these are pink shorts with flamingos on them.
My dad would be fuming.
But just let them, like Mel Robbins has this theory, let them theory or whatever it is, but just let them. Like, so what, they make a joke, but like for me, I'm like, well, if someone makes a joke about my fashion and they don't dress like I want to dress, why should I care?
Yeah.
And just let them have the reaction, because it doesn't reflect on you, it reflects on them. Because, I don't go out and judge someone for wearing something because I don't care. It's their choice and that's what they do. And so why should someone judge me? And if they judge me, that's their own stuff. That's their own thing. Whereas I want to wear my boots, so I'm going to wear my boots because I want to wear them. And if someone else has a problem, then why is that a problem for me?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to realize. Like, if you want to change something, just because you're going to a social situation where you won't fit in exactly perfectly. I'm not saying like, you know, if it's a black tie event, don't turn up in a bikini.
White vest and
you know, if it's a white tie event, obviously, like, you know, do it your own way, but maybe
Within
respect
reason,
the dress code. But I mean, if you're meeting your friends and you just want to wear like me, cowboy boots, or you want to wear your pink flamingo shorts that I just imagined.
I do have a pair.
Exactly. So
I only come out on holidays, but
but if you want to wear your pink flamingo shorts and it's sunny outside, who cares if your dad's gonna say, "Oh, that's a bit weird"? Who cares? Because if that makes you more comfortable and you actually love them, so why should you give them away or never wear them just because of how somebody else reacts to them? I think, like, you know, if it's not inappropriate, which it's not, to wear something bright, for example, you know, we're all told to kind of fit in and tone down and blend in, but we don't need to. And I think this is the thing, like, why shouldn't I wear a cowboy boots? Why not? You know, I'm not a cowboy, but
you're not. You fooled me.
no, I'm not. Like, I'm not a cowboy, okay, but also like it's just some boots.
Yeah.
And if someone has a problem with how you look or that you stand out because you talk to everyone or you talk a lot or because you have a different fashion sense or whatever you do, like, why is that a problem?
Yeah.
So I think my advice would be is like, if you're changing something just because of other people's reaction, I wouldn't change that.
Yeah.
You know, like obviously in a relationship, for example, or a friendship, if your friend, I don't know, does something, I'm not saying criticize their looks. I'm saying if you're in a relationship and your partner or a friend says, when you say make these jokes, that makes me sad, like that's maybe fair. Like, you know, you can change that behavior.
It's more of opinion on.
Yeah, but that person's not saying, oh my God, you look so bad. It's just saying, when you made a joke, it made me feel a bit bad. So, and then you're aware, and that's a compassionate thing to change about yourself. And that's fair. That's like what we do in relationships. You communicate and you try not to hurt the other person. But if you just want to wear something that you want to wear and someone else has a reaction to it, why should you change it? And again, it's on you to say, well, I'm wearing these because I like them.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to wear them, I didn't buy you a pair. Like, you know, and that's fine.
No, definitely. And it's so difficult to ignore that voice, the RSD, very much, especially, you know, if somebody is giving you actually voices their opinion, which is, I think that's probably part of the worry, isn't it? That we think that if we do go out to the pub in our flamingo shorts with our mates, they're going to turn around and be like, you look off date. And the reality of it is, they're not actually going to say that. Or if they do, it's going to be, you know, banter that's going to be socially acceptable in that environment. And
again, if they make jokes that make you feel a bit crap, you're allowed to say, look, I like these.
Yeah.
And
like you say,
have you got a problem? Like, you know, like you can tell people, like, you made a comment, I just don't really like it because I wear them because I like them. And you can communicate those things with your friends and people around you. But also, I guess sometimes people just say things and we can just let them have a reaction. But if it's someone close to us, you know, if someone says something about my cowboy boots, I would just say, well, actually, like, I bought them because I was really excited about them, so I'm going to wear them, and I don't think they're a problem. So, do you know what I mean? Like, you can explain it, but it's just, don't change things just because of other people's opinions, I think.
Like you say, I think it comes back to that quote that you said about just let them. And that is something.
And I feel like I'm stealing. This is not my quote. I've learnt this online from Mel Robbins.
Credit of Mel Robbins.
Yeah, Mel Robbins, Let Them Theory. I didn't read the book, but I kind of understand the principle. And it's just like, if people have a problem that you need to make a massive mind map to process things, who cares? Just let them. They're the ones with the problem. And I think it is hard to always implement that, you know, especially like, for example, if it's like your boss, that's someone that you work with all the time and they don't understand things, it's harder to just let them, I guess. But, you know, I think you can get to a point where you're like, well, this is just a pair of pink flamingo shorts. So if they don't like them, they don't like them. But if I want to wear them, I'll wear them. And that's what I want to do on social media, to kind of show people that it's okay to just be how you want to be. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong just because it's different from how everybody else is. And I think that's what everybody wants. People want to be authentically themselves, whether they have ADHD or not. You know, everybody wants to be able to be how they are, but I think people just think they have to blend in and not do something different because they'll stand out. But I think with ADHD, like I think I have a low tolerance to being not authentic. So I think I'm really, like, I find it really hard when I know someone's not being authentic. And I think the masking and stuff, I think I found it quite easy to unmask, because I'm like, I find it so much easier because I'm not drained. And now forcing myself to mask is annoying. And I don't want to mask now, because now I'm like, well, why should I mask if this is how I work and this is how I am? And I want to wear my cowboy boots. Why should I feel exhausted by trying to think about everyone else's opinions of me, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it is hard because, like, for the social media stuff, I find it quite, I think I have RSD when it comes to social media. I'm like, oh, whatever I post, I'm going to get judged and people are going to look at it and laugh at me and whatever. But I'm like, you know what, whatever. Because it's me, like, I'm showing up authentically on social media or in real life. And like, if people have a problem with that, then I don't know. I feel like people always have an issue. But whatever you do, there will be somebody that
doesn't like it. You can't please everyone, and I think it's probably a part of a problem with ADHD. Having ADHD, you want to almost please everyone most of the time, and it's quite difficult to let that go, isn't it?
life you've been told you're doing this the wrong way, or this the wrong way, and this the wrong way, and
so it's like 20,000 more criticisms, and you know, when you're younger than everyone else, and it generally sticks with you, that negative feedback.
And it's trauma because you know, I guess a neurotypical child doesn't get as much criticism, and so they don't feel as guilty or like they're a failure for getting things wrong to the same extent as somebody with ADHD. So when you're growing up with constantly being told you've done this wrong, or you forgot this, you've lost this, you've broken this and this and this and that, you're late, you're never on time, it's like you start that, you internalize that, and then you constantly have that shame around those things. And then it's just so much harder.
That kind of fear amplifies, doesn't it, into whether that's working life, relationships, or going out in social settings in flamingo shorts.
And I think exactly. But I feel like because of all of these criticisms, you're just more sensitive to doing something and being perceived wrongly, I think, because obviously, like, and I think if you're late diagnosed as well, I think it, like, I don't know, imagine being diagnosed at 60. I spoke to someone who was diagnosed at 60, and I just think, oh my God, you've lived so long with all that shame, you know, and it must be so hard to then go back and unpack it all and be like, oh no, like, that's just how my brain works. Yeah, and I think it's a lot of trauma, and I think even, like, I figured it out when I was 24. So, you know, there's still 24 years of feeling like, you know, I'm always late and I can't ever be on time, and oh my God, and I can't keep it together all the time. And it's all these years of feeling bad about it, and then you just have this so much shame, and I think that's what then gives you that RSD maybe. I mean, I'm not an expert, I don't really understand it that well, but I just think because of all this shame, you then feel so sensitive, because if someone makes a comment, you just immediately, it's like a burn, isn't it? Because you're immediately like, oh my God, I've done it wrong again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so it's quite hard in that aspect. But I think once you realize that it's ADHD, and once you start slowly, genuinely understanding, because I think a lot of people with ADHD, see those mistakes or whatever, they see them as personal failures, and they don't necessarily always connect those personal failures with ADHD. So even though they know they have ADHD, they still, feel guilty and bad and shameful about being late all the time.
Yeah.
But once you understand, I'm late all the time because the part of my brain responsible for estimating how long things take doesn't function as well as it should be, and you can be more understanding with yourself and find ways around it, but not beat yourself up about it so much, because you can just kind of be like, oh, it's just ADHD and I can figure something out. It's not me. That doesn't mean I'm a bad person because I can't do it perfectly. So I think.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we can do, like you say, is it's difficult with later diagnoses, but the earlier that we can spot ADHD and understand it, I think makes a massive difference, because then I think you're more likely, like you say, to be able to say, let them, and you can be yourself.
Yeah,
essentially.
and that's what I want to do, like with the podcast, like with all the messages I got. It's just so nice to hear that people are like, oh my God, I related to so many of these things. Thank you so much. And I feel like I've done something to make somebody else feel like they're not a failure. This is just how their brain works, and that it's okay. And I'm really happy that I provided like a resource for people to be able to give to family and understand, give to family so they can understand them better, and the same with the social media stuff. Me sharing my story about my cowboy boots, I'm just showing that you can be how you want to be. That's the whole point of life. Like, if you're masking and you're kind of like constantly worried about fitting in, you're draining so much of your energy, but you could just not care. You could just not care. And it's hard to not care. It's a skill, but it takes time. But and that's what I want to do, I think, with talking about my ADHD. I just want people to just look at me and be like, oh, Patrycia's just being herself. So I think I can be myself too, because it's fine.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. Like, you can just do what you want to do.
Yeah, and it's really inspiring. So please keep posting about being Patrycja and about how to be yourself, because it's really useful, like, for anyone out there that feels like they are, especially with ADHD as well, masking and sometimes not feeling genuinely themselves necessarily in some social situations or whatever it might be. So yeah, the more that we can share through podcasts or mini series or social media, I think is really powerful, and is the best way that we can help with people's understandings. And so thank you for sharing everything today.
I love talking about ADHD. I could talk for days.
Especially with ADHD being on all different tangents as well. We'll be here for a long time. But yeah, really thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.